to be alive in this land of ours. Good to drive in this land of ours.
Hello, Canada hockey fans in the United States.
The Hockey Time Machine.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hockey Time Machine. I'm Glenn Dreyfus. Tonight, a celebration of life, the life of TV sports legend Ralph Mellanby. John Shannon has joined us, who is also taking a break to our great delight from his work at the Olympics. Jeff, I want to follow up with one more thing before you bring John into the conversation. Money is where the rubber hits the road. And in '88, ABC trusted Ralph with their money. When Ralph wanted a camera to go down the ski hill to capture the speed, Roone Arledge and ABC picked up half the tab. When Ralph wanted a third helicopter, again, ABC made it financially possible. That's the biggest kind of trust there is.
Well, and because of the trust we had in each other, I mean, you know, Ralph and I talked every single day. Doug Beforth and I spoke every single day. I mean, we were together to get this done. And when Doug and Ralph and Mason decided that we ought to have a camera track the downhill ski racer or whatever, the three of us each went to, you know, the authorities in our company and said, we're all together on this now. The host is in on it. The CTV people love it, and we should do this. We need to make this work. And Arledge, you know, do it. Done. You know, we'll split the cost or whatever. So the trust we had built amongst each other with the leadership of Arledge, Mellanby, Beforth, Mason, etc., we were as good as it got. And so there wasn't a lot of convincing that was required. If we went to Arledge or Mellanby, it's at times, to get something done, not a problem.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't fill up one gap between 76 and 88, which is 1980. So Ralph was the hockey guy again for ABC. And a week before the game started, he and Roone Arledge go to Madison Square Garden and they watch the Soviet team just eviscerate the U.S. Olympic hockey team. 10-3. And as Ralph told the story, Roone said to him, "Don't worry, Ralph. There is no hockey story here for the U.S." Now, I don't remember what ultimately happened, but do you?
I wasn't there. I was living in, are you ready? Moscow, because at that point I had left ABC and was working for NBC, putting together the ill-fated Moscow. I heard the story, and I know it's true, because Ralph called me and told me the story. And yeah, absolutely. Absolutely true.
Doug, do you have anything to weigh in with on 1980?
Well, there's the story of Ralph. Again, this goes back to entertainment and pictures and storytelling, that after the Soviets had been beaten by the U.S., the story, as I understand it, is that the coverage saw Jim Craig going over and looking for his father in the stands. The story is, and I don't know whether this is true or not, is that that footage actually was from another game, but Ralph had the forethought and sort of the quick thinking to use it in the live broadcast to tell the story of what was going on, because in fact Craig was doing it in the arena. They just didn't have the shots of it live. Now, is that true or not? I don't know, but I like the story.
and that is what counts.
Hold
Who
on.
cares if it's true?
That's right.
Yeah.
Why would we let facts get in the way of a really good story?
That's right.
John, thank you for being patient with us and taking the time. John, you said this about Ralph's legacy, and we should point out John Shannon is also part of a very exclusive club, those who have been executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada. But you said, I think every show that we see now as a foundation, somewhere in the corner, there is a brick with Ralph Mellanby's initials on it. Tell us why.
Well, first of all, I'm sorry I'm late, but usually I take things over and go past the deadline. I don't come in late. But Ralph did not invent Hockey Night in Canada, but he really, really redefined it. He modernized it from what it was when George Retzlaff was the executive producer. And the foundation of what Ralph built was exactly what has been done for 5 decades. Better replays, storytelling, close-ups, whys, not whats. Those are things that, and not just Hockey Night, but in our country and in the world of hockey on television, those are things that everybody does do, and there's an expectation to do, and that guidance and that vision came from Ralph. So from that perspective, he did lay the foundation of the modern television broadcast of hockey, and he did it with aplomb. He did it with vision. He did it bigger than life. He did it bombastically, and the most important thing in all of this is if he did it, you never wanted to let him down. You wanted to make sure that you gave your best, because, and it wasn't that Ralph was going to give you shit. Ralph wasn't going to give you shit. You just knew how important Ralph was, and you wanted to be with Ralph. And that was really important.
It's interesting to me, John, that even though he was this imposing presence, you've called him the voice of God, but he also encouraged his people to take chances and not to be afraid if those chances didn't work out.
Well, the guy in the top corner there, go back to the top corner. Not that I'm trying to tell you how to produce this thing, but just like a good producer, right, Jeff? So the guy in the top corner in the green shirt there will tell you that along with our old college roommate, Rick Briggsjude, Ralph had the vision to bring us all along. Ralph allowed us as 21, 22, 23-year-olds to take chances. And he was obviously 20 to 25 years older than us, but he thought like we did. He thought like a young man. And that was important for the vision of the show as well. And the one thing in doing that, Glenn, was he would demand that you take chances. And then if you screwed up, he would have your back. He would stand up to the bosses. He would stand up to the suits and say, "Don't worry, kid, I'll look after you." And he would take the bullet, and we would all get on and learn our lessons from what we did right or what we did wrong. And Ralph was there to make sure that we were protected. Now, what I will tell you is, if there was just the two of us in the room and the door was closed, we got royal shit. But that's okay. That was okay. It was just two people. You weren't embarrassed in front of a group of people, and you learned from it. And I'd like to think that there's lots of times, and I know that Doug can speak to this too. There's lots of times in the years that have gone since Ralph stopped. At least I stopped working directly with Ralph, which was in '88 after the Calgary Games, because I was lucky enough to run the hockey venue for them. Was that Ralph always had your back, and you knew Ralph had your back, and that was really important for your confidence, so that you could take chances. And you took chances. You know, what's this Frizzle say? Take chances, make mistakes, and that's what Ralph allowed you to do.
John, I think you had a lot more of those behind the doors one-on-one with Ralph than I did.
Smart ass.
Hey, since I have you and Doug here together, maybe you can explain to me this photo.
Sure.
Is this the Hartford Whalers version of the Hanson brothers, or what's going on?
Okay, go ahead, Dougie. You go.
Well, at the time, we were all these four guys. If I'll go from left to right, Rick Briggs, Jude. I'm in the middle with a lot of hair, and John standing, and in front of us is Ed Milliken, who at the time was the statistician for the broadcast from the Gardens. And part of the philosophy of the set that year was whenever we would interview a player from the visiting team, we would have a series of uniforms from that team behind them. So what we started to do was every game we would get a picture taken of the three of us with the visiting team's sweaters on, jerseys on. So this was from the Hartford Whalers when they were visiting the Leafs, and probably Davey Keon was in that game, and probably Gordie Howe.
Well, I'm glad you weren't players for the Whalers. I mean, it would explain why they never won anything. Okay. John, what did it mean to you when you finally got fitted for your baby blue sports jacket?
Oh, wow. Well, as Doug will tell you, we were living in the same apartment, and the first job you got at hockey night meant you got a cash payment per game, and you got to wear the baby blue blazer, and you went down to a little tailor shop just across from 415 Yonge Street in Toronto. They took your measurements, and you waited and waited and waited, and every Tuesday you'd go to the office saying, "Is my blazer here yet? Is my blazer here yet?" And the moment you got your blazer, you felt about 6 inches taller and 3 feet wider. You could go anywhere and do anything in any city in the National Hockey League because you were part of a really, really important fraternity, and that was Hockey Night in Canada. And it meant a lot. It meant so much because, you know, when you think of when we started working, there was Brian and Billy and Danny and Dick in Montreal, and Jim Robson, Babe Pratt in Vancouver, and Dave Hodge in Toronto. And we got to wear the same stuff they did. We got to look like we were there with, you know, iconic broadcasters. It was the most important piece of clothing you wore when you were 20 years old. Every Wednesday and then every Saturday for a while, and in the playoffs. And you prayed you got on the road, and you prayed you went to the Boston Garden and Madison Square Garden and Chicago and Detroit, and you got to wear your baby blue blazer.
In America, we had to wear ugly yellow blazers.
Well,
Ireland loved them.
I would tell you, I actually think that I think that Ralph saw those ugly banana colored things, and he said, "We got to do something different," and we went to baby blue.
Hey, John, no pressure, but is this the night we finally learn what happened to your jacket?
So I have a deal with Simon & Schuster, and like Maggie Haberman, I'm going to hold it for 2 years, and you're going to read it in the book. How's that?
Okay.
Glenn, I just wanted to pop in for a minute and just say, John, you are so kind to protect me, because the reason you were late was because this idiot forgot to send you the link, and I did with Doug as well. So, you know,
I
remind you of my production days,
I
right?
just figured Laura didn't want me on, and I wasn't taking it personally, because it's, you know, she's never forgiven me for deciding, and Doug will endorse this. Laura was in charge of our figure skating in Lillehammer, and figure skating was going to be big. It was the Tanya Harding year. It was wild, but we only had one channel in those years. We had one linear channel. So we cut a deal that we would do hockey until they lost. We're going to run hockey live until they lost, and we'll do the intermissions and pre and post with figure skating on tape. Well, the hockey team never lost. The hockey team went all the way to the gold medal game. So on 9 nights of the Lillehammer Olympics, when everybody's expecting figure skating, there's that damn Canadian hockey team still winning. And Laura wasn't very fond of me in those days, so we were.
I was always fond of you. I just, I was a persnickety chip on my shoulder kid.
You? No.
Oh, I know that surprises you, John. I'm sure it surprises Doug and Jeff. And the reason I wanted to come on is because Glenn, no offense, but I just met you a week ago. But these three men, John, Jeff, and Doug, were incredible mentors, were so patient with me. I mentioned earlier, John, before you came on, how Doug was so kind to mentor me and put me on shows that I probably had no business going on because I knew nothing about the sport. But I appreciated everything you three guys have done my entire life for me. You mean the world. Thank you.
So I just to set the record straight, because we don't like crying on television.
I'm not crying.
Oh yeah, that's right.
There's no crying in television.
So in typical Mellanby, I got to tell two stories. So in the last couple of weeks before Ralph passed, I said, well, I got to phone Laura and see how he is. So I phoned Laura and says, hey, Laura, it's John. She says, what, you want a date?
I said, I'm pretty sure you're not calling me for a date.
First thing she said. Then, God bless him, I phoned Ralph a couple of days later in the hospital. Have a great call with Ralph, a fantastic call. And the first thing he tells me, he says, John, I'm quite a celebrity here in the hospital. All the nurses know who I am. I told them to Google me. I can't make this shit up. And the other thing he said, and I said, well, Ralph, if you get out, I'm going to come down and see you. He said, no. I'll come on the podcast. I'll come on the podcast with you and McCown. Jeff, I do a daily podcast up here now. So, and it's got pretty good numbers, but Ralph was one of my, when I made the move from being a production person to being in front of the camera, normally on a Saturday morning. I don't know how that
happened, by the way.
What's that?
I don't know how that happened.
Well, look at the guy in the green shirt.
Guilty.
Yeah. So I would do a radio roundtable that was simulcast on television every Friday from 5 to 7. And invariably, 9 o'clock Saturday morning, I got a phone call. John, yeah, Ralph. So here's what you said you should have said. I got a critique from Mellanby every Saturday morning as a broadcaster, or as Ralph would say, a broadcaster. So for all those years. So now it actually was great for the last decade or so that Ralph and I, we had great fun talking about our business and talking about how he would help me as an announcer. So
you were great in front of the camera. You were great behind the camera, and
stop,
you've been
a
wonderful friend to our family, and you too, Doug and Jeff, of course. And thanks so much for being with us. Just amazing.
Wouldn't have missed it.
My pleasure.
Thanks for inviting.
Okay. Thank you, Doug, Jeff, and John. Laura, I'd like to keep you on here for a moment. If you have more of the testimonials, if you'd like to read another couple, and then we'll go to another recorded interview.
Who's up next? Joe Bowen, I think.
Well, I was going to do Pip Wedge next.
Yes, Pip, who's fabulous.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to read. Scott Moore was referenced by Jeff Mason. He also very involved in Hockey Night in Canada, was the former head of CBC Sports, currently CEO of Uninterrupted Canada, and a great friend of the family. He actually sent this, and I was able to read this to Dad before he passed. I will always remember our first meeting at Hockey Night when you were so kind to me as a Ryerson grad. That's a familiar story. We just heard the same from Doug. Every time we met afterwards, you would tell me I was your second favorite Scott. As we know, my brother's name is Scott. Working and learning from you was a career highlight. I remember one night in Montreal sitting with you, Ron Harrison, and Dick Irvin after an LPGA production. I could have listened to the three of you tell stories all night. At the time, I could only dream of having a career like that. You helped make that dream a reality for a redheaded kid with very little talent. Of course, the highlight was you throwing a drink at me at the CTV Christmas party and then laughing about it with me the next day. Your legacy in the business is unrivaled. Very sweet. And, you know, sorry, let me read one more from David Hill, who was, when you talk about Roone Arledge and Ralph Mellanby, David Hill, who was an Australian, was very innovative, maybe too innovative. He was the one who brought to life the glowing puck, which I think, you know, most Canadians weren't too keen on. But he's a real character, and he's the former longtime president of Fox Sports. He writes, "Dear Laura, I heard your dad had gone to that big control room in the sky. A great, wonderful man who utilized his talents to the fullest and lived a good life. Big hugs and huge sympathy." I think that's just so sweet. So back to you there, Glenn.
Okay, very good. We'll see you again before the end of the program. But right now, I want to introduce a taped interview I did a couple of days ago. In 1973, Canada's CTV named Pip Wedge vice president of programming. Now, that's a type of high-pressure job. It usually has a short shelf life, but Pip excelled in the role for more than 20 years, just part of his remarkable career. And even before that, he joined forces with another remarkable individual, Ralph Mellanby. We spoke with Pip Wedge earlier this week. Pip, you came to Canada from England in 1964, and one of the series that you oversaw as executive producer at CTV was BA Musical Showcase, a show produced and directed by one Ralph Mellanby. Tell us about the show and about him.
Well, I came over to Canada to work for CTV, and I was doing this primetime show called BA Musical Showcase, a couple of daytime shows. And it was a musical show. Denny Vaughan and his orchestra, who were appearing at the hotel, the Bonaventure Room in the hotel, Queen Elizabeth Hotel downtown. And had George the Flesh hosting, and we had all kinds of guests on, like Frankie Lane and the Four Aces, acts that were appearing at the Bonaventure. And also Petula Clark they had on the show, who was a friend of mine back in England, so I was able to get her for the show. Anyway, I'd been doing the show for a year, no, maybe 6 months, I guess. And we lost our director, and I had to get another director from the pool that worked at CFCF. And one of the directors I knew I'd become very friendly with was Ralph Mellanby. Now, Ralph was primarily a sports director. He did Know Your Sports and various local sports, CFL games and so on. And he did some other shows as well. But in looking for a replacement as the director for BA Musical Showcase, it was also a game show, and there were members of the public who appeared as contestants on the show. And when you're dealing with them, you've got to be very quick as a director to pick up on anything that suddenly happens, because it's all that part's unscripted. So I asked Ralph if he'd do the show, and he wasn't totally enthused about it, I don't think, but he said sure he'd give it a go. And so he started directing BA Musical Showcase and did a very good job on it. He was very good with people, as we all know he was. And all the artists he made feel very comfortable working in the studio with us, and did a terrific job for us. And did that for me for probably close to a year, I would imagine. Anyway, around that time, Frank Selke at Hockey Night in Canada was looking for a new executive producer to add a little pizzazz and life to the show. And he was made aware of the fact that there was this Ralph Mellanby, who was a sports director, who also was doing this kind of show, and therefore had a bit of a showbiz style to him that perhaps might be useful. So they asked Ralph to go and talk to them, and he talked to them, and they were impressed, but they proved very accurate in their judgment. And Ralph got the job, and I was delighted for him. I was sad to lose him. I got another director, but that's another story. But that was how we met, and how I did contribute, perhaps in some modest way, to his long-term career with Hockey Night in Canada.
When you first recruited him to your shows, what did you see in him?
Well, I knew the key was that he was in sports. You know what's going to happen, but you don't. And you've got cameras, and you've got to be ready to move cameras from one point to another. And he was terrific at that, and he did a terrific job for me in that. And in doing so, we became very close personal friends. We were dealing with a guy who worked for British American Oil, who had devised the show. And some people, I've met several like it in the television business, they're slightly oddball, and you've got to handle them with care. And Ralph was remarkably tactful with it. We used to mutter about him when we were on our own. He did a wonderful job with him. He satisfied the clients. He satisfied the agency. He did an excellent job for CTV. And he and his wife, Janet, became good personal friends and made us feel very, very welcome, my wife, Liz, and I, when we first came to Canada. And it was great to be able to not only be happy in the country, but to enjoy working as closely as Ralph and I did, and enjoying it as much as we did, plus the friendship that followed for 50 more years.
You mentioned the first lady of the British invasion, Petula Clark, and there's a photo that I imagine you know about, very cozy photo of you and Petula and Ralph. So that's a photo you must treasure, as I'm sure he did.
Oh, yes, indeed. And in fact, Laura, his daughter, asked me if I could send him that, because it was on the wall in his apartment, and she wanted to have it. So I got a copy of it on my computer. I was able to send that to him. And as I turn and look up here, I've got a copy of it on my wall here. Well, along with Ralph. And God, we were good looking in those days. Don't know what happened, but there you are.
So Ralph eventually worked with all sorts of big names: Celine Dion, Paul Anka, Tom Jones, Anne Murray, Nat King Cole, Louis Armstrong. Did you ever see him get awestruck?
Well, I wasn't with him when he was working with all those stars. My stars were more modest, except for Petula Clark, maybe. But so I didn't have an experience of working with him, with those people. That was a new career that he developed, emerging out of BA Musical Showcase, which was a modest start, but took him on to much greater glory.
You mentioned a 50-year friendship. Can you tell us about the Ralph Mellanby away from the studio, away from work, and what he was like?
Well, we did. We met socially from time to time at parties. We played quite a lot of tennis together. He was a member of the Boulevard Club, and I was a member of the Toronto Cricket, Skating and Curling Club. And we each played tennis in our own stylish, if not terribly efficient ways. And so we socialized quite a bit in that area. And we would talk on the telephone frequently. He would always start by saying, "How's Julie?" Now, my wife's name is Liz, but right from the start, when we first came to Canada in '65, there was a British actress named Julie Christie, who older viewers among you will remember. And he always, I think it was perhaps in part her accent and in part her looks, but he always called her Julie for Julie Christie. And one of the last things he said to me was in a message he left to me on Christmas when I was out of town, and saying, "Give my love to Julie." He was just a lovely guy to socialize with. He was modest. He talked authoritatively about hockey and about working in, but he was never a boastful guy. He was proud of what he did, but he never made you feel that he was the only guy around who could do that kind of thing. And I admired him tremendously for that.
You mentioned that CBC came calling at Hockey Night in Canada, and they had the steak, which was the game, but they wanted more of the sizzle. And do you think Ralph was able to provide that?
Oh, I think he was. I think And I think he rather found it taken to that kind of environment where a bit more was required than just shooting people, hitting pucks or kicking balls or throwing balls. And he had a sort of enjoyment of showbiz and showbiz people and things. And so I think it was a very natural move for him to make. And I was delighted it worked so well for me, but even more delighted for him that he got the job he did and did that incredible job he did in the business.
Coming from England as you did, what did you make of this sport of ice hockey?
I loved it. Now, I was a great football fan, and the British version really is sensibly called football because you kick it. And soccer is a name that was sort of used occasionally over there, but rarely. But hockey, had a lot of similarities with soccer in that you passed a puck instead of a ball, and you were trying to shoot on a goal. So I really took to hockey when I first came over, and in fact, my brother-in-law, who was already living over here, he took me to my first Leafs hockey game, and my final triumph when I left Montreal in '67 to come to Toronto was to be able to hang my Leafs jersey on the door of my office at CFCF in Montreal, where the Leafs had just won the Stanley Cup, the last time they did it. Because so I had that final triumph among these Habs fans, but they forgave me.
When you look back at your own remarkable career in the entertainment business, what event or business dealing or assignment do you look back and you're most proud of?
I mean, the best thing that happened to me in my entire career was coming to Canada. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. I came in '65, and my wife and I have had just a wonderful time here. I had a very enjoyable career at CTV. I did, but apart from the first job I had, which was working for Western Union Telegraph Company when I got out of the Navy, I never applied for another job subsequently. I always got lucky and got into jobs. I worked in television. I worked actually originally for a musician named Steve Race as his sort of secretary business manager, and got into the music world and in the jazz world and did writing. And so there's no one thing. I just consistently got lucky and things happened to me. I didn't win any major awards or do anything dramatic, but I was always the better number two than number one, it seemed. I was a good first lieutenant. And the reward I got was the number of great people I met, the time I had, times I've had, and as I say, most of all, coming to Canada, which was wonderful for me.
Well, when it comes to luck, we were very lucky that you made time for us, Pip, to talk about Ralph and both of your careers. Thank you so much for taking the time to do that.
Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak about Ralph. He was such a dear friend, and Liz, Julie, and I will miss him an awful lot. Thank you.
Pip Wedge. We have a couple more interviews to play, but first, some final comments from Laura Mellanby. Laura.
Thanks, Glenn. I mean, first of all, you've done an amazing, amazing job hosting this tribute. Very grateful. It's just been beautiful and well done. Thank you. I wanted to say thank you to Pip, who was not live, but on tape for his efforts, and I'll send him a note as well. I also wanted to acknowledge Gary Mavera, who was so significant in my dad's career when he was at CTV. And they worked together on doing a few things. And Gary was very insistent on bringing my dad's company into CTV when Johnny Esau retired. So very grateful for him. He passed away last year, but I wanted to remember him and how much he meant to me and our family. Brian Robertson, who I was unable to reach, was another entertainment partner for my dad. They created Air Farce and a number of other things together. That was sort of part of my dad's career in entertainment that continued well past his Hockey Night in Canada days. And the last tribute I want to speak of is from Dennis Lewin, the former ABC Sports executive and NFL Network president. Dennis writes, I got to know Ralph very well through the years. He was a terrific person, a great talent, and someone I proudly called a friend. Although we often spoke, we could go a few years without even seeing each other. He joined us for countless projects, not the least of which were ABC's Olympic telecasts, the most memorable being as the director of our coverage of the Great Miracle on Ice in Lake Placid. For all his professional talents and achievements, he was a very down-to-earth, humble person who always enjoyed a great laugh. He will be missed by all who ever came to know him. Rest in peace, my friend. Thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. There's still a couple of interviews to go, but I will leave the rest of the show with in the very capable hands of Glenn. My father was a phenomenal person. He was a great dad. I speak for Scott and our family and the grandkids in saying that he was one of a kind, and hashtag like no other is what I've been putting in a number of things. And so, Dad, I love you. You would have loved this. You would have loved this tribute with all these folks that you were so fond of. Glenn, thank you, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Okay. And thank you, Laura. And it has been my pleasure to do this and to get to know you as well.
Same.
Okay. Good night, Laura.
Good night.
So for 4 decades and more than 3,000 games, Joe Bowen has been the television and radio voice of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Joe spoke with us about Ralph between games a few days ago. So when did you first cross paths with Ralph?
First cross paths was not very good. I had repeatedly sent in applications and all of my information and all of my recordings and everything, hoping for a job, and got the very nice letter from Ralph saying that we will keep your information on file. But he wasn't alone. I'd sent it to all of the different NHL teams. I still have a very nice letter from Cliff Fletcher down in Atlanta telling me that they would keep me on file. But the first time I actually, saw and met Ralph was after I had arrived in Toronto after being hired by Telemedia Sports back in 1982. And he was great. I mean, he was very appreciative of what I was doing. He gave me some advice every once in a while as to things to do and whatnot, but was always there, always very friendly. And I never got to do any Hockey Night in Canada for him, but it was always great to see him and really appreciate what he had done for the viewers of watching our sport.
Maybe if you would swore at him, he would have hired you.
Yeah, maybe. No, I was only Len Bramson that took that little bit of initiative.
So one thing I have to imagine that you and Ralph agreed on was that sports broadcasts can be entertaining, should be entertaining, as well as informative. I know your broadcasts are from listening to them, and that was Ralph's mantra too.
Yeah, I mean, there's 82 games, and not all of them are going to be Rembrandts. There's going to be Picassos in there too. And I think that you have to be entertaining. I think that you have to show some personality. And I think that's what Ralph did in his hiring. And obviously, the largest personality possibly ever to be a part of hockey was Don Cherry. And that was a stroke of genius as far as Ralph is concerned. But I don't imagine, I'm sure that he had a lot of discussions with the folks at CBC regarding Don and some of his thoughts and his way of going about things. But having said that, I mean, that made an intermission that was a show unto itself. And it was something that you rarely ever have seen since. In fact, I don't think we have. And you could certainly tell by what went on in the press box at Maple Leaf Gardens or at Air Canada Centre, Scotiabank Arena. When that intermission came on and Coach's Corner came on, all of the press was up. The volume was turned up in the press box so that they could listen to Coach's Corner. That doesn't happen anymore.
On a personal level, Scott, Ralph's son, began calling his dad the mayor because he was amazed at how many people Ralph would come up and talk to them, and they would all come up and talk to Ralph. Did you see some of that interaction when you were with him?
Oh yeah, I mean he was he knew everyone. Everyone wanted to say hello or have an opinion or shake hands, that sort of stuff. Certainly later on in life, when he was at any golf tournament that I was at, he was sort of holding court with a lot of people, whether we former players or management or whatever. You know, and I think one of the things that the Hockey Hall of Fame, and I've been blessed by being awarded the Foster Hewitt Award for broadcasting. That award is voted on by the NHL Broadcasters Association, which is the people that are doing play-by-play or color, that sort of thing. There has to be a spot in the Hockey Hall of Fame for someone like Ralph Mellanby, and certainly Don Cherry. My goodness, that's just a travesty as far as I'm concerned. They all are, if not in the broadcasters department as far as the Foster Hewitt Award, then they certainly should be in as far as the builders category. How far our sport has come because of the ingenuity and the vision of someone like Ralph Mellanby is ridiculous, and that should be rewarded. And I'm very disappointed that it hadn't happened before he has passed, but certainly his legacy should be rewarded with it down the road. And I hope that the Hockey Hall of Fame will do that. And we have to remember, it's the Hockey Hall of Fame. It's not necessarily the National Hockey League Hall of Fame, like Major League Baseball or Canton, Ohio is the National Football League Hall of Fame. This is about the sport. And Ralph Mellanby did more for the sport by what he was able to do technically and vision as far as what was going to be presented on air has got to be rewarded somehow, I believe.
Well said. You mentioned golfing with Ralph. I have read that when it came to sports, he was competitive. Was he on the links with you?
I think he was a lot like a lot of us. He thought he was better than he was. And so why wouldn't you be competitive? Absolutely. And I mean, anybody that is able to attain, that kind of level is going to be competitive in anything. And I understood. I heard that. I never got to play with Ralph, but I was at many golf tournaments with him, and I know he enjoyed the sport.
Assuming that there is anything besides hockey and broadcasting, did you and Ralph ever talk about anything besides hockey and broadcasting?
Oh, we talked about our kids, and family. Obviously, it meant a great deal to him. He was so proud of Scott. I think that everything was, the family was something that he really cherished and enjoyed in his retirement. And I have 4 boys, and we talked a little bit about that and family and stuff. I think that was a very, very integral part of his going on, and also maybe possibly his retirement.
One hockey question before I let you go. I find it amazing that after last year's playoffs between the Canadiens and the Maple Leafs, that it's the Leafs who have rebounded with a fantastic season, while it's the Canadiens who have completely unraveled. Did that surprise you as much as it surprised me?
Well, I mean, they got where they were going because Carey Price was so good. And when he's not available to be the ultimate equalizer, it makes a big thing. It really does show you how much team chemistry and everything else is a success story. And that was one of them. I've also said, that mental toughness is something that has to be stuffed down your throat. And I look back in the history of our sport, and mental toughness comes when you are a favored team and you get upset. And we've had a number of historical situations like that. You think about the Islanders and Trottier and Bossy, and oops, no, lost to the Maple Leafs, Lanny McDonald in overtime in Game 7. You think about Gretzky and the Oilers, and oops, no, miracle on Manchester Street, the return of the big third period for the LA Kings. And even more recently, I suppose, the Tampa Bay Lightning, President's Trophy winners, oops, no, out in 4 straight to Columbus. So maybe the Montreal Canadiens have done the Leafs a big service by force-feeding mental toughness down their throat to understand the heartbreak when you are really a favored team and then not to win. So hopefully this team that is certainly the most talented one that I've been associated with over the 40 years that I've been broadcasting has had some of that mental toughness stuffed down their throats, and maybe they'll respond with that when they get to the postseason this time around.
Well, Joe, happy 40th anniversary. That's right. You started with the Leafs in '82. And make sure this summer, look for me in the crowd when you're going down the parade route. Make sure to wave at me, okay?
Well, Glenn, you might have to get a spot a little further north, because I think if it ever does happen, they'll have to start the parade in Timmins and work its way down Highway 11.
Well, let's hope we get a chance to find out if you're right.
You bet.
All right. Thanks, Joe.
You bet. Thanks, Glenn.
The one and only Joe Bowen. Those in Toronto know our next guest as Stormin' Norman, or maybe the late night vampire. He certainly had his fangs out during a 2-decade run on sports radio. Norm was one of many who Ralph took under his wing. So right now, let's share a latte with Norm Rumack. Norm, you've said that Ralph was like a father, a brother, and a mentor to you. Tell us about the origins of your relationship and how it developed.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's an honor to be on, Glenn, so thanks very much. And yeah, in terms of Ralph, I graduated from Syracuse University with a master's degree in TV and radio in '81. And then my first job out of school, well, my second job actually, was working on, it was called the Bob McLean Show. And I guess I was wearing my Syracuse University jacket. And Ralph had me walking by. So he noticed the jacket, and we got to talking. And I realized quickly, when he told me his name, I knew who he was. Ralph told me, he's going to be, working on a show as executive producer with Don Cherry's on. Would I be interested in working on the show? I said, yeah, absolutely, because Don was, one of my heroes, of course. That's how things got started for me meeting Ralph. And, he's such a down-to-earth guy. And you're right, I meant what I said. He was like a brother and a father to me, because years later, when my career was advancing, I worked 3 years as a story producer for CTV News on Canada AM, the national morning news show. And finally, I got my big break working on The Fan as a host for almost 20 years, or about 20 years. And, Ralph would occasionally come on the air. He would give me advice.
About the Grapevine show, one of your duties was giving guests a ride from the airport to the studio. And that doesn't sound glamorous, but it's a job I also loved early in my career, because you get one-on-one time with some famous folks.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it was, I would basically just, sit in the back seat with the guests, and we have the limo driver, doing the work. So we meet them, most of them flew into Pearson Airport at Toronto International. And the studio we were using to record the show was in Hamilton. So it was a bit of a ride. But there's a couple of guests where we had some unbelievable things, funny things that happened along the way. Amongst them, let's start off with Bobby Orr. So Bobby's in the back and we're riding. He's a pretty, well-mannered and shy guy. Well, shy, he'll talk, but he's not Mr. Outspoken, or he certainly wasn't as a player. Anyway, so we're riding along, we're chit-chatting, and at one stage, like out of nowhere, I mean, I wasn't keeping track of time. So Bobby says to me, I'll modify the language. How's that? It's a family show. So Bobby says, do you guys know where the F you're going? And I looked at him and I smiled and I said, no. And then he laughed too. Well, we got to the studio on time, so it wasn't a big problem, but it was just the way, the driver, I don't know, he took a wrong turn somewhere. We weren't way off, just a little bit off. So I said, no, we don't know where the F we're going. So that was the Bobby Orr story. The next one, also a legendary name, Glenn, was none other than the great heavyweight Joe Frazier. So we're riding, and Joe's dressed like he's going to a wedding. He's got a tuxedo on. And along the way, as sometimes happens with any vehicle, but this one's a limo. So what happened was, start seeing steam coming out from under the hood. Steam, well, that's not a good sign. Joe Frazier, one of his businesses he invested well, he had a limousine business in Philadelphia. So obviously he'd know a lot about cars. So what happens? Dressed in his tuxedo from head to toe, looking like as sharp as he could be, he gets out of the car, not me, not the driver. He gets out of the car, lifts the hood, and with his bare hand, he twists off this cap while it's steaming from the radiator. I think there was maybe we had a water bottle in the car or whatever, something like that. He puts the water in, puts the cap back on while still steaming. I was like, he didn't grimace, he didn't say, ouch, nothing. Just like, no big deal. And I was like, I look back and thought, wow, I wonder if I could have done it. But it was steaming. I was thought, like, God knows, like, it might be like a geyser. So there's Joe Frazier fixing up the car, and we get back on our way. And it's like, for him, like I say, with his bare hands, he didn't think twice about it. So
Norman, he was smoking Joe Frazier.
Yeah, well, he was smoking Joe, and that would have been steaming Joe Frazier. But it was just amazing. I think guys dressed in a tux, it's no big deal. He pulls the steaming cap off the radiator. Derek Sanderson, another legendary Bruin from the late '60s, early '70s. I think he won Rookie of the Year in '68 or '69. And of course, as a Leaf fan back in the '60s, those of us who were Leaf fans would go to the Marlboro Juniors games. And so I'm 9 or 10. It's 1965, I think, 64, 65. Why am I talking about Derek? Well, Derek was playing for the Niagara Falls Flyers, and even then he had a reputation as being like not only a skilled player, but a real tough guy. So I lean over the glass, and I had to stand right up. I think I stood on my seat because, I'm 9 or 10, so how tall could I have been? So I lean over the glass, and I said something, I don't know exactly what I said, but I said something involving some nasty words to Derek Sanderson. He wasn't looking at me, he was looking the other way. But then, Derek was no pushover. He heard what I said. He looked around at me, and he was like, I got the evil eye. So being 9 or 10, I wasn't exactly brave. I jumped over my seat and I took off down the hall because I thought he was going to come after me. And so years later, when I'm riding in the limo to take Derek to the Grapevine show, I told him that story and he laughed as hard as I did. I was scared. I won't use the word. Starts with an S.
I want to ask you about that mouth that was 9 or 10 and eventually was used successfully for a couple of decades on sports talk radio. What did Ralph think about your early years on the radio when you were an agitator?
Well, you mean about the shtick, about my style? Well, you know what? Ralph didn't really talk about that much. He was, like I say, when I said he was like a brother, big brother, like a father, he was just proud of me. He was proud of all the guys he ever worked with, whatever kind of, part of the industry they were working in. And I did score very high in the love-hate index, which the people who I work for, that's what they care about. It's called, a strong U. like it's the letter, like shaped like the letter U. So you're strong on the left side, strong on the right side, meaning half the audience loves you, half the audience hates you. It doesn't matter which, because they're both important. Because either side, they'll tune you in. And sometimes the ones who hate you tune you in as much or more than the ones who like you or love you. But I
Well,
succeeded.
the times you had Ralph on as a
Yeah.
guest, did you behave yourself? And
Oh yeah, there's
did
no
you
way.
ever dream of giving Ralph a hammerhead
No,
alert?
no, no. I mean that would be blasphemous. There's no way I was going to do that. Like, well, you know, it's just no. I wouldn't even think of it. There's no way I would trash talk Ralph Mellanby, not for any money, not for any price. No way. It's like I said, I wouldn't do that to my father, or my mother, and there's no way I'd do it to Ralph Mellanby.
Well, I am so glad that the late night vampire is now able to go out in the daytime again, Norman. Thank you so much for sharing your memories. It's been a blast.
Yeah, well, and by the way, my sincere condolences to the Mellanby family. And like I say, I was blessed by the Lord to meet Ralph, to get to know him, to have him give me an opportunity of a lifetime. So I'm honored to be on this program, honored to tribute Ralph, and I'll always pay tribute to Ralph for sure. Glenn, thanks so much.
Thank you so much. I won't try to top that. I'll just say goodnight.